Yes, I'm here. Hi.
Good, it's coming in good. So, welcome to the show. This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we have Sunny Day on the show, and we're happy to have you on for the first time on the Fam Electric Ghost podcast. This podcast is where we interview indie artists from around the world. We've been doing it since 2018. This is the audio version of the show. We do a video version, but we still do an audio version. So we're happy to have you on the audio only version of the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So we sent you the questions, and we're going to kind of go through that and kind of free form, kind of go through it, and then as things come up, we'll just kind of diverge into whatever we come into. Um, so the first thing I always ask all the artists I talk to is like, when you first got into music, and like what age is the same part of that question.
I was around 8 years old when I got into, I would say, writing lyrics. I've always been into music and singing my whole life, but when I started to feel like that I could actually, do it myself and kind of have that dream begin for me, started around 8 years old.
That's cool. I mean, that's interesting. The one thing I would just add as a footnote, a lot of the singer songwriters or creators I talk to did start like when they're under 10 years old. That it seems like that's a very common thing. I've interviewed like 75 people, and the majority of them all say what you just said. So
Yeah, I heard that too. I don't know why that is. It's just for me personally, I kind of had it all figured out. The same dream. So.
I think creative people have that kind of in their DNA. I think there's a certain type of person that becomes a musician, right? It's a person that has all these things and knows how to actually actualize their feelings into some form of art. You
Yeah,
know,
I call it the architecture mindset. You can just build things from nothing.
yeah, it's just interesting because it's like there are people that play pianos or guitars or bass guitars, and then there are people who are singers and they can come up with the lyrics. People who are producers, they can jump on a computer and build something that a regular person couldn't even understand how to do it. Um, it's just like there's a certain creative bent, and the Victorian poets, because I was a big into poetry, and I took courses in school. They called it like the muse. That you could
Oh
pick
yeah.
up this like universal idea of the muse. And today, people call it like the ether, or you get it out of the kind of like there's this overall arching universal like expression that you can tap into, and as an artist, it seems.
That's interesting. I've never heard to it referred to as ether, but it does make a lot of sense. Um,
Yeah, it's more of a new age kind of term.
yeah, that's kind of cool. I've always thought it was referred to just as like I don't know if it's like a not a it's a collective conscience, but it's just I would say just like a pool of creativity. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's but
I think it's like there's all this like if you think about music, like there's the bass clef and the treble clef. There's only so many actual notes on a piano or a guitar, right? But the
right.
combination of the chords and all the notes are like endless combinations. But there is a certain limitation of like, okay, this is like the range of the instrument. This is what it can do. Um, but then how you interpret that is like endless. And it seems like there's this one idea that I always thought was really interesting from a band I really like called the Who. And the Who had this rock opera that they actually failed to create. They created Tommy, they created Quadrophenia, and they tried to do this third one called Lifehouse. And in Lifehouse, they had this idea there's like this like universal note. There was this idea that there was this universal key that you could tap into, and if you tapped into it, like everything would be great. It would be like this hippie dream. That if you actually tapped into the universal note, like everything would be solved. All your problems would go away. It was just kind of it was like a very kind of maybe naive idea, but it was this idea that you could find some kind of note that would solve everything. Um, and
Interesting.
Yeah, it was just interesting because I was like, okay, well then at the end of the day, that's the album where like the song "Won't Get Fooled Again" comes from, or "Teenage Wasteland." So at the end of the day, the story is that, well, that didn't work.
Right.
And they tried to tap into it, and then you get "Teenage Wasteland" and you get "Won't Get Fooled Again." It's like, why? Because you couldn't actually achieve it. Um, but it's just interesting. Like, so I think like just kind of diverging, but I think all artists kind of pick up on that kind of universal idea. Um, where you get your ideas from is kind of like, it's hard to describe to somebody that's not a creative person. They're like, well, how can you write? You know, have you?
Yeah, it's just like how usually the question that I get is where does it come from? Like, you know, where
Yeah,
do you find the words for that, or how does it just appear? And it's really uh I don't know. I think it's more to do with starting at a young age and repetitiveness. The more you do something, the easier it kind of
yeah.
becomes to you, I guess.
It's like
And
verbal,
especially if you love
verbal.
it.
Well, I think you talk about like sport athletes talk about muscle memory, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
they keep on doing a 3-point shot, and then their body just knows how to do it, right? So
yeah,
it's like a musician, like if you get like musical memory, right? You get
yeah,
creative memory. So like every musician, every artist kind of has all their reference points, right? They have all the people they look up to, right? All the people they were influenced by. Then they have their own style, and then they practice. And so as you get more into your skill, you just start to have this kind of musical memory that's like a muscle memory, and you just can do it. And it's hard to describe because you just know what goes with what. You hear something and you know what lyrics go with it. You hear, your beat comes up, and then you figure out how to arrange it because it's intuitive because you do it so much that you actually get a skill set. You actually build it up because you actually do the work.
yeah. That's how it is. I agree, 100%. Really, it's just and then when you love it, it
It's
makes
a
it.
passion.
Yeah, it's something
It's,
that oh, I'm not forcing myself to do this. This is my like escape
yeah, it's
from.
not your 9 to 5. It's
So.
like what I find is like most musicians, it's like it's not their 9 to 5, it's their passion. It's what they want to do as their 9 to 5, but they can't. Or they even when you have a musician that's doing it as their full-time job, they still have to do the publicity. They have to go deal with their agent. They got to go do this. They got to do that. And sometimes they don't get to do what they really like to do, right? Maybe they only get to be on stage for 2 hours. And the rest of the day, they got to do all this other stuff. And
Yeah,
it's
the
really
PR.
not, yeah, it's not anything to do with actually doing what they want to do. you know,
Mhm.
so even when you are in it full time, there's all these things that you have to do that take away from the actual work that you love. And I think that's what the people just, okay, well, I love it so much, I'll deal with it. Well, the things I don't like about it, just so I can do it. but
I think that's why I'm gonna probably stay independent. Well, yeah, I'm gonna stay independent. I'm always gonna be an independent artist.
Yeah, I think the thing about being independent is the problem with jumping on a label. Like if you go and jump on a label, it seems like a good deal initially because like they might give you support, right? They'll give you upfront money, they give you tour support, they give you a manager, they get you booked. If you get the right kind of deal, right? The idea, like back in the '70s, if you got signed, you got A&R, you got somebody that deal with your tour manager, you got a booking manager, they put you on the talk show circuit, they get you in the radio stations, to do all this stuff, so that you could just concentrate on doing the music. But then it's like if you don't have a hit, like they maybe will let you stay on the label for like 3 records, and
Hmm.
if those 3 records don't do good, then you're gone.
Yeah, it's like you're one and done, and it's never personal. It's just business, you know.
Yeah,
And they're
yeah.
in the beginning, they're like, okay, well, let me stop.
But it's like back in the day, like in the
Yeah.
'60s and '70s, you might get 3 shots. But
Hmm.
like today, you go on a label, you're probably only gonna get 1 shot.
Yeah. There's
You know,
a few reasons why I will never be on anybody's label, but that's neither here nor there. Just my personal.
Yeah, well, I think you gotta like, if you don't like the directions that the labels are going, and you don't think there's like, unless somebody creates a brand new label that matches your ideas, there's no. It's kind of hard to find that. There was a couple of labels that happened in the '60s that people thought they were artist labels,
Hmm.
like Warner Brothers and Geffen were supposed to be like the artist labels, and then the artists found out like, well, these aren't exactly what I thought they were.
Yeah.
But they were supposed to be geared as artist centric labels, and then suddenly the artists started rebelling against them, saying, "Well, I guess you guys aren't as artist centric as you thought." Um, but let me get into more like, so when did you actually start working on music that you have today and realize that you had a talent for it and you had your own voice, that you weren't just like a lot of people start music and they're playing like classical music, or they're being trained on piano, or they're playing in some kind of cover band, but they don't write their own music. When did you actually like take your own music and start to build on it where you actually presented it and played it?
Well, very recently I started um, doing this, actually applying my voice to my words to, actually producing and, coming out with the sound, the physical, something I could, physically say, listen to this. It's something I made. That happened maybe 6 months ago, but I have been studying producing and all the little intricate details of making music for years. That was a very long process. Um, Personally, for me, just having the time to mentally put into like actually looking up every single detail of producing and and learning um that took years, feeling like I could comfortably write my words down and express how I really felt,
Mm-hmm.
and not just writing what somebody would want me to say. That took, it's a process. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was evolving from one thing to the next. To I felt like I was just like uh maybe 6 months ago, just one day I woke up and
So,
I
yeah. So did it start with like poetry, and then the poetry turned into more like lyrics? Because I think I've talked to a lot of artists, like they're writers and they start with poems, and then poems aren't exactly what you do to do music. Like they can be the start of it, but the poetic form usually doesn't fit music. It has to get adjusted to fit with beats, and even like rock bands, you can't take an exact poem. You have to adjust it to make it fit within a structure of a song. So
right. So
was that something like a process that you probably were writing for a long time, but then you had to make an adjustment, right, to make it fit in music?
yeah, so for me the process basically was I have been writing poetry for over a decade. I would say most of my life I've been writing since I could write. I've been writing poetry, but I wondered why my poems, when I tried to like read them to a beat, yeah, it didn't fit.
Oh, you
So
yeah, it was a process. You figured it out.
I had to figure out how to make my words go with the beat, and that's literally how I learned. A technique, basically, how I learned that I had to
Yeah,
write to the music.
yeah. I think that's every
Yeah.
song. Like I think I had that thing. I'm in my 50s, but everything I had was like poetry. And then I was a keyboard player, and I never thought to kind of mix them. And then suddenly I
Mm.
decided, kind of like, wait, I'm playing synthesizer, I'm doing all these ambient things, and I'm never saying anything. I'm just playing. I was in bands and I never sang. I never did. I
Oh.
just like I never even thought to do it. I had them like totally segregated. Like here's my poems, here's my music. I never thought to even put them together. And then suddenly, one day, I said, well, you know what? I see all these bands, and I love all these bands. Like these guys actually made this stuff and integrated it. And I said, well, I got to work on it. And it did take a while, like you said, because the poems did not work.
How
They,
old were you when you started
I
playing
started to
piano?
piano. I was starting when I was like 12, and
Oh wow.
I had started on a clarinet when I was like 7, 8, and then I realized you can't write on a clarinet. Well, you can, but it's not the kind of music I wanted. It was going to be nothing but jazz, which is cool, but
A
that's
7 year
not.
old writing jazz. That's
I
cute.
do write jazz, but it's like you can't write like pop songs on a
Yeah.
clarinet or a piano as a writing instrument. And then when I learned how to do the piano, then I said, well, I don't want a piano. I actually want like a synthesizer because then I could actually do more than just the piano. So then I had to learn how to play organ and electric piano and all the different things the synthesizers can do. So it's kind of like you had to relearn how to play piano to play synthesizer because it's different because you're actually emulating other instruments. So you have to learn how to play like a guitar, learn
So
how to play like a trumpet, like a set. You have to act like it's not exactly the same kind of way you play piano.
so do
So
you
I
play
start.
by ear or do you play like do you
I
music?
originally was, yeah, I was originally trained to read, but then part of the synthesizer techniques is that you actually have to learn things that aren't really written down. Um, so yeah, eventually it just became I can sight read, but a lot of it's by ear, and just because I don't have the patience to go writing it down, I'll let my computer write it down. but
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
but it's like a lot of what I do is because I'm a musician and I have this kind of one of the cool things, like a lot of African American musicians, we have this kind of natural play by ear capability. And my grandpa had it. He could pick up a banjo, he could pick up a guitar, he could pick up a horn, he could just play it. And he never was trained, he couldn't sight read at all. And that's very common. In a lot of musical African American families, you'll find like they can play it, but they can't read it. But they can jump on the instrument, they can play
Yeah,
like
that's my current situation.
yeah, it's a lot of people like that. I mean, Hendrix was like that. I mean, there's a lot of famous musicians that can't sight read, and they can outplay anybody that can sight read. So it's like the feel like you get a really good musician like a Hendrix. He heard a chord, he could pick up any chord just by
Hmm.
hearing it. He would just know it. He could just do it. And it's just like they're famous piano players that did the same thing in jazz and stuff. So it's like really doesn't matter. But the whole idea is this. I just tried to integrate it and figure out how to make it work. And it did take a long time. I mean, I was playing since I was 17. I didn't really get the lyrics working until I was in my 40s, right? So, I mean, that's kind of far, a big, long process. I didn't really get this going as the ghost until I was like in 2008, and I started when I was like 17.
Hey,
Um,
better than never. I mean,
yeah, it's just a dream I had. It's like, okay, I'm finally gonna do something and not be just in a band. You know, I'm actually gonna have my own band.
exactly.
So that I think that's the decision you have to make as a songwriter. Like, are you gonna be in other people's bands? Are you being like a studio musician? Or are you gonna, or are you gonna be like your own project? So like I think we talked before, and you said you wanted to be in bands, right? But you ended up being like a solo act.
Yeah, I grew up wanting to like start a band, but I just had friends that had different interests. Like I never actually came out and said, "Hey, let's start a band." But
Mm-hmm. Even they were
guess I
hoping
should
it
have
was going to
maybe.
happen, but you didn't. You never had the situation actually happen, but you would have wanted it to happen.
Yeah, my mom uh signed me up for the Power Chord Academy, which was a little school in New York, but just because it was like in a different state and I was a minor, like I ended up not going. But
Mm-hmm.
like I just feel like everything happens when it's time for it to happen, I
Yeah,
guess. So it just
yeah,
wasn't time at that time.
yeah. Sometimes I mean, a lot of people start when they're young. Like I was in all these bands, and garage bands and basement bands and cover bands and stuff, and just because I wanted to get into it. Um, and everybody kind of grew out of it, and I just kept on going, and I decided to become like a bedroom producer, kind of before bedroom producers was like a thing. Before there was a
Yeah.
net, before there was a net, Before there was a DAW, I had all these like tape recorders.
Oh, so
And
you're OG.
yeah, I had like Tascams, and I still have like digital recording systems that are not DAWs. They're like I have like Zoom 24 track recorders that are hardware recorders.
I'm gonna
And
get Tascam.
yeah, they're really good because then you don't have to deal with a computer. And you can just put down whatever you want to put down. There's no like CPU limitation. There's no like gotta do an upgrade. It basically is like it's like a tape recorder, and it's like you can multi-track, and you multi-track whatever you want, and it doesn't stop you. It doesn't say okay, it doesn't have enough memory. It doesn't. It lets you kind of overlay and create all these tracks. And
How many tracks does it like?
well, the one I have an R24 from Zoom, and it does 24 tracks, and then you can bounce it to up to 48.
Oh wow, that's
So
impressive.
I can do like 24 tracks, stereo tracks, so maybe 12 stereo tracks, and then I can do another 12 stereo by doing a bounce. What is called a bounce? It's like an old technology, but it's a physical recorder. And what I like about it is I have all these synthesizers. I don't have soft synths. I have like Modes and Rolands, like hardware synths, real keyboards, and I can just plug them into this thing with jacks, like guitar jacks, into this
Hmm.
device, and it records them. And then I can bounce them. So I can say I can do a set of chords, and then I can do another set of chords. So I could have two lines of pianos like built into my song. I could keep on overlaying pianos if I want to. I could have like 12 pianos on top of each other, or I could have like a piano and a bass and a drum. I can,
Sorry, I just had like a very funny scene pop into my head. Like
yeah,
you're
well,
at
maybe,
home,
yeah,
maybe
maybe,
you're
well,
like at full concert with all the whole band, and it's just you there.
yeah. You basically can just overlay everything, and you can build whatever you want. And I loved it because it's like I used to have bands, and everybody stopped showing up, and then I said, well, now I can be the drummer. Now I can be the bass player. Now I can do, and that
Keyboard
basically
player.
that's
Sorry.
well, that's what the ghost is. The ghost is basically just me acting like it's a band, but it's all me. It's
Wow.
kind of like what Prince and Stevie Wonder do. I actually take the time to actually make myself into a band. It's a lot of work, but I like it. So, and then I'm a control freak. So like anybody who's like a singer songwriter, like you tend to be kind of a control freak. And then once you have this kind of situation, you can kind of control everything. And anybody that's in a DAW has got the same kind of experience. Um, but before DAWs, this is the way I was doing it, and I still do it this way. And people would say, "Well, that's a lot of work." And I said, "Well, yeah, but it's actually fun."
Yeah, I've actually thought about doing that, but like, well, I've just thought about doing it to like produce a song, for different
Yeah, yeah,
tracks. Like, we're actually recording it into my laptop still, but just I don't know. I just thought that would be kind of cool to like make a beat or something.
yeah. What's cool about it is very organic. And the thing about it is, it sounds more like stuff that was written in the '70s or the '60s or the
Yeah,
'80s
yeah, like that real.
because it has
That's
a
what Michael
little,
Jackson did.
yeah, because it's more human. Because if you don't let the computer do it, right, you don't have something saying it's got to be perfect, right? You're kind of doing it based on the feel. And over time as a musician, you can keep the beat because you're a musician, right? People who get into the kind of dog world, they kind of don't have to worry about that because the dog will keep the beat for you. But in this kind of these recorders, you got to play kind of good. You have to play in time. You have to actually know your song. You have to actually know how to, which is, as a musician, that's a good way to keep in your skills up because if you basically learn the song, so then you could go out and play it, and you'll know it because
Exactly.
that's what I'm kind of old school. It's like if I write my song, I want to actually know how to play it. I don't want to depend on the computer to do it. I actually want to go out and play it in New York. I want to play it, so I learn how to play. But I think it's just a different way of doing it. And there are people who are trying to come back into it. I get people I talk to all the time that actually would like to work with me because I do it that way. Because then they're like, oh, I want to do that. And there's a lot of people that don't do it, and I do it. So then they come to me and I help them out. But it's just a process, however people record. Like I don't, it's not one way better than another. It's just what I choose to do.
Do you ever use like weird objects and like different room for ambience? Like when
Oh
you
yeah, I mean, I have mics. I have like all kinds of mics, and I have all kinds of weird devices that
Yeah,
basically.
like a spoon, like
Yeah, I have
stupid shit.
samplers that I go and do what are called field recordings, right? So a field recording is you go out and with a mic and you go and break a glass. Right? You go and
Oh,
take a
cool.
like a book and you put the mic and then you open the pages in front of the microphone. Right. So that it picks up you turning the pages. Right. And then you go and put that into a sampler and then you use that for like a beat or you use it for an effect. So you go and learn how to like record ambient sound. I go for a walk in my neighborhood and pick up a bunch of birds and
I've
then
done that with
bring them in.
cigarette lighter.
Yeah, it's cool. I think it's like a lot of bands in the '60s used to do it, like Genesis and Yes. There's this album where they actually had a field recorder in a forest, and this album called "Close to the Edge." At the beginning of the record is a recording of the forest. For the first like 30 seconds, it's the recording of what they got out of the forest.
Oh, that's
Starts the
beautiful.
starts the record. I think it's getting back into that. They're actually going back and realizing that Peter Gabriel was real famous for wanting to do stuff like that. He was the original lead singer of Genesis, and he kind of was an art school guy. So he was always pushing them to do very arty things um, like that. And I was always a Floyd, early Genesis were big, like a lot of art school students, and they were like into doing very experimental things in the studio. And I was like, okay, I'm a big fan of that kind of effort because it's low, not just using the DAW, but going out and using all kinds of weird things, like even going using like backward tape loops, doing all kinds of strange like effects, like grabbing like a guitar pedals and running your voice through a guitar pedal. Or running the drums through a phaser, or doing something that you wouldn't expect to do, like
Right.
mic in your amp, and then recording your sound coming through an amp and then putting it back into like a synthesizer. So I'll mic my synthesizer, record it, have it come back into another synthesizer, and then make that sound get manipulated by that other synthesizer. So it does all kinds of strange stuff. And it's stuff that's kind of like point in time, kind of like painting with sound. And you do it in such a way where it's like super artistic and very experimental because it's not something you can easily repeat. So you
Yeah,
put
that's
it down
well
on,
put. Well put.
yeah, you put it down on tape and you have it on tape, but you can't just go on the computer and replicate it. You have to kind of live with, okay, this is a point in time type of thing I'm going to use, and it's going to be what it is, and it's kind of special because that's what it is, but you can't replicate it all the time. So
Exactly. Yeah, I
it's
feel
a
you.
different way of doing things. Everybody wants to be able to capture everything today and say, hey, I can recall this and recall this. It's like, well, maybe you shouldn't do that, but it's different. I just like to do different things. But so you were new into recording and you figured out how to actually turn the poetry into music, and then you started to learn how to actually get, to integrate the beats with the flow. Maybe talk about some of the first songs that you were successful with that. What you think in your catalog represents like the biggest it's like thing that your big breakthrough in how you do that.
My big breakthrough in how I
Maybe like the
write a
first
song, you
song
said?
yeah, maybe because you publish like on SoundCloud stuff you have out there. Is there any particular song on SoundCloud that you
Mhm.
think that you actually did that, got to the point where you wanted it to be, like you had learned about how to do this, and what's a good representation that people want to listen to you of, like what maybe your best piece of work.
Um, I like all my songs, but I'm never satisfied.
Yeah.
I'm never satisfied. So I see, uh, I like my song "Chick," even though I have a lot of unreleased music.
Mm-hmm.
that I like more right now. I guess my one of my published songs I would go with Chick, but I'm never really satisfied. Like I'm a perfectionist, so I'm not happy with uh my current uh skill level. Even though I've gotten compliments and stuff, I still critique myself.
Well, I think every musician, when they're out there, like your first album, you grow from your first to your second to your third. There's a natural progression from song to song. So I like vibes a lot,
Oh,
and
thank you.
and I think I talked about before that there was this. I'm trying to find the other one I really was into. There was the other one. Oh, Captain Sonny, because there was like it's just kind of like it's like a trip hop. Cause you got multiple things. You have like straight like hip hop and rap, but then you have this trip hop, and I'm kind of into psychedelic stuff like Pink Floyd and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And I like the kind of trippy nature of that.
Thank you. I spent probably like I would say altogether 30 hours making that
Trying to
like
get it.
straight.
So you
Yeah.
just like did you just get into a zone trying to get to it? Like you had
Um
an intention and you just stuck on it until you could get it.
well, that's how I am in general with any time I make a song, I have to complete it. I cannot like let it sit.
Can't put it down. You just
No, I have to complete it. It's just like I can't explain it, but it has to be done. And um yeah, that's more of like a soundtrack though. That's more of like it's I don't know if it's a beat or it's just really like an experience. Like I try
yeah.
to
It's
transcend
very
the listener
sound
to
painting.
another, you know, galaxy.
It's very much like a sound painting. You know
Yeah, yeah.
I'm a big fan of that concept, which you know that kind of comes from like if you think about George Martin from the Beatles and Hendrix,
Oh.
they
Yeah.
they both came up with the term. Like so Hendrix, people asked him about Electric Ladyland, and they said, well, like we hear birds, we hear the ocean, we hear all these things. Right on that record, he's doing all this really interesting stuff with his guitar and his effect pedals. He created all these weird sounds. They're like almost like synthesizer sounds. And so a lot of synthesizer players actually name check that Hendrix record and say that's a very progressive record because he does really interesting things with the effects on his guitar. They're almost like synthesizers. And and when somebody asked him about it, he said, "Well, it's a sound painting." And I was like, "Wow, that's a really interesting idea." And then George Martin talked about it with the Beatles and said, it makes Sergeant Pepper's. The idea was not to have the Beatles do in Hamburg live, but to make them sound like they couldn't sound live and actually do things in the studio that you can't do on stage. So you can actually experiment and create tones and colors that you can't do on stage.
They made Yellow Submarine, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, I
submarine's
love
very trippy. That's very trippy.
yeah. I love quite a few of their songs, but wasn't a lot of their music from Chuck Berry or something like that? Wasn't
Well, the original music they did was covers, and then they created like Sergeant Pepper's and Rubber Soul and like Yellow Submarine are more like psychedelic. They're not
oh,
as like black rock started. A lot of English bands like the Stones and Led Zeppelin totally cloned the blues. But the Beatles actually have this kind of psychedelic thing that doesn't really come from the blues. It's more like it's like classical and progressive and
yeah, I
some
agree.
it's some other direction. Where like
I
Led
just saw a
Zeppelin.
movie where it was like suggesting that. I don't know from.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, all the British bands kind of stole from black artists. That's the truth.
Well, yeah,
They
that's
all
about it.
kind of built off of Chuck Berry and Lead Belly and Robert Johnson, all the famous blue guys from the Delta. They did, and some of the bands, like the Stones, would actually say they did it. They'd actually write down that the song came from Robert Johnson. But Led
Oh, yeah.
Zeppelin, Led Zeppelin didn't. They would act like they didn't. They would take an exact line from Lead Belly or Robert Johnson or any of the great blues guys and not cite it. They wouldn't actually cite that it came from them. And so that I think that was that's like a known issue. um, but yeah, to me, it's like, it's like plagiarism. Like if you're a writer and you don't acknowledge that you took something from somebody exactly,
Hmm.
that's not cool.
Yeah, and I think that that's just so whack as a musician, like, because it's just like it's my shit, Don't if I use something, I mean, I like to do like little catchphrases, but like it's like well known. I
Yeah, I
think it
mean,
should
I
be
think
like
everybody
it
kind
should
of,
be quoted who it's from, or if I do a cover,
yeah, I
you know,
mean, you just usually put it down if you've got a bunch of samples, you got to cite your samples. Like if you go to
yeah,
publish, you got to cite where all your samples come from, right? It's if you go in and you put down like Ice Ice Baby and you say, hey, that's original. And it really comes from the Queen David Bowie song Under Pressure. And he said I think, Vanilla Ice acted like that was original. And it was like, that's not original. That is totally coming
no,
from
it's
that
not
Queen song.
original.
Totally comes from the Queen song. And then he ended up losing all his rights on it because he tried to say he changed it a bit and he didn't. It was exact. So you got to really, if you love the music that you're referencing, and there's a lot of, when you're in the blues, there's like a blues standard. Some of the Delta blues, like you can't really do it other than doing it. That's what it is. And so if you do a Robert Johnson song, if you go do like, oh, I'm going to go down to the crossroads because that's what it is. It's always going to sound in that zone. Like if Eric Clapton does it or some other blues guy does it, it's always, if Stevie Ray Vaughan does it, it's going to sound similar because it's
Right.
it's it's kind of a form like EDM. Like the blues is like a very specific form, and you can't really get out of it. Um, so everybody knows that the original guys are like Johnson and all these other guys, right? And that's what it is. And so if you do it, then you're kind of always giving homage to them. That's just what it is. Um, but I think, yeah, people have to acknowledge where they come from. But I think it's just interesting in your music that you have this varied style that you can't really pin it down, which is cool.
Thank you.
Because that's what you're going for. You don't want to get like you don't want to get pigeonholed, right?
No, and because I'm such a versatile person, I have no choice but to express myself in versatile ways through my music.
Because I think there's so much today. Like we live in an age where somebody could take a 1920 style, and put it with like EDM or hip hop or trap and like bring it in. And so you get like a flapper type of beat and throw it into a modern song. You know, you could take some like New Orleans like blues and throw it into a song. You can have so many cross mods that you just take whatever you feel.
Yeah, there's so much blending that we can do. It's just so uh unlimited. It's so unlimited. Like there's so much uh that we can pull from, especially with the new technology
Yeah, with the
we have
sampling. I
available
mean,
to us.
yeah, the fact that you can sample. What I like to do with samples is not do like an Ice Ice Baby, but but you take like a beat and then you rip it up. So there's a new type of, it's like granular synthesis or granular sampling. You take a clip of something that's popular, right, and
Yeah.
then you rip it apart and you reorder it, or you
Mm.
warp it, or you turn it inside out. So by the end of the day, it doesn't sound anything like what it was, and
Wow.
then it becomes like just a new resource. And a good example of that was like the Bomb Squad for Public Enemy. They used to take all these samples and they layered them in such a way it was hard to figure out where they came from, which is cool. Like bands like De La Soul and Public Enemy were really good at their choice of samples. And even today, there's even more of that. What you can do with that, you can actually do it so you don't get burned because you totally rewrote it. You just take something as a sound source and then reorder it and change it around, and then you don't get pinged for a copyright violation because you actually turned it in. You actually were more artistic with it.
Um here's something that I find really confusing that people are doing with samples, and I would just like your opinion on it. I've noticed that like some artists like they'll use a sample from like a really older popular song,
Hmm.
and like they'll play like the chorus or something for the first like couple notes of that old song, and then they'll play their song, and it has like nothing to do with the
The new song.
sample. It's
Yeah.
just like, is that just like a tag for popularity, or what is that?
Well, it's because a lot of times they're taking something that they can't play. Because a lot of times if you're a producer and you're not a musician, you're taking like a Motown or like an old soul record that has really good production,
Mhm.
and you like it. And what I've seen people do is they take very obscure soul songs from the
Mhm.
70s and 60s that aren't super popular. Like it's not a Marvin Gaye song. It's not a it's not like a Four Top song. It's like it's from the Delphonics and it's a really deep track and nobody knows it, right? So
Yeah.
so they grab that hoping they're not going to get a strike on it because
Oh, I see.
it's not that popular, and then they use it as a hook, because the thing is if you look at those songs from the 60s and 70s, they're very hook oriented because the musicians who wrote them were really good musicians, and so they have really good hooks, and so people take those because they're mining for these really good beats or these really good lines, and they can't write them, and so they use it, and then they put whatever they can do on top of it. And my problem is a lot of times what they put on top of it is nowhere near as good as what they took.
Yeah. Okay.
So then I'm kind of like, okay, like it's cool you got this beat, that's interesting, but what you're doing is not interesting. What you took was interesting. um, and so I was like, once in a while I'll get a guy like that where I find like a Earl Sweatshirt or MF Doom. When they do it, okay, I like what they do because their lyricism is so good, it matches the sample.
Yeah.
If you get a really good rapper, a really good hip hop, you get like a Kendrick Lamar, you get you get an Earl Sweatshirt, you get an MF Doom. They are really good lyricists and rappers, so they actually can match the sample they took. You know,
Yeah.
but if you can't match the sample you took, I'm like, maybe you shouldn't do it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
That's just my opinion. See, I think you need to have your lyricism so good that it justifies using it. I think you gotta respect the music that you're using. That's my opinion. But
Yeah. Sometimes it works though. Some people can pull off a good sample.
well, some people, because I think it's really because I said they're grabbing stuff that's very hook oriented,
Yeah.
and people like the hooks,
Mhm.
and so people are going for the hook, and maybe they're not even going for as much what they say, but what they and they're good producers in that they figure out what hooks to put together. And so if they got a good drum beat and they put the hooks together and they go into Ableton and they get it done, it sounds good. It's just a different style compared to somebody that might have wrote it from scratch. But that's just my thing on it. Though all the people that don't like what I say, you can complain. But so I think one of the other things I like to get into is like your influences. So who are your reference points or your influences when you're writing? Who are the people you looked up to that made you want to be an artist?
I would definitely say Mariah Carey, Chris Cornell, to
Oh
name a
wow,
few.
Soundgarden. That's interesting because that's grunge.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Chris was
It's
just
phenomenal
an
voice.
unbelievable artist. He was unbelievable. He was, yeah, amazing.
Yeah, because if you look at Kurt Cobain, you look at Eddie Vedder. If they're great, but like Chris Cornell actually had like the Mariah Carey voice of grunge.
Yeah.
He had the range, like he had like a Robert Plant, like
It
yeah,
was
very good.
otherworldly,
Yeah,
but
he
it
had a very good vocal range and like an operatic voice. An ability to hit notes that other bands couldn't hit. That technically he was like that is good as, to me, as like a Robert Plant, as
Yeah.
good as like, as like a Freddie Mercury, like a guy that can actually hit the notes, which is like, some people kind of belt it out, but they actually can't technically hit the notes like he could. He just like had a classic lead singer voice.
Yeah, he was born to sing for sure.
Yeah, I mean, he could have been in like a '70s rock band, and it would have been like the Stones or like Queen, or that's the kind of tradition to me he was in. He was a lot of people compared Soundgarden to Led Zeppelin and said they grooved like Led Zeppelin, and he had the range of Robert Plant. Because Robert Plant could hit these really high notes and then hit the mid range, and he could do the same thing, which is pretty cool. But that's very interesting that you Mariah Carey and then Chris Cornell is totally different areas of music.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's cool to be that divergent in what you like. I mean, I like Johnny Cash and I like Johnny Rotten.
I love Johnny Cash. I have probably all of his albums.
Yeah, like my little side note. My parents are from my mom's from West Virginia, Morgantown. So it was like hillbilly country. So when I used to go in the '70s in the summer, I used to go visit my coal miner grandfather, and he just liked like Hank Williams and Johnny Cash. He's like really into like real country, like roots country, and Johnny Cash is like everybody, like the black coal miners and the white coal miners, they all like Johnny Cash because he was like he's the man in black. He's this outlaw guy, and he
Yeah,
really didn't care.
Johnny was that dude.
Yeah, it was just the coolest country because it's like some country today makes you feel like, okay, it's isolating certain people, it's only for certain people. But Johnny Cash was like, he'd go play in Folsom Prison to the prisoners, you know, and he's like he was kind of like, he had this kind of universal thing where he didn't feel like he was picking one group over the other. He was like he's going for the underdog.
Yeah, Johnny has a special place in my heart for sure. Definitely sentimental and nostalgic.
Yeah, it's just a really cool sound. It sounds like a train. His
Yeah.
band was kind of famous for sounding like a train on the track. And they had this really good rhythm section, and it's like, and he
Yep.
had this Dylan like lyrics, like Bob Dylan lyrics. His
Yeah.
lyrics are really good. For country music, it's like some of the best lyrics that you're ever going to hear are on his songs. This written and really awesome performances and the way he performed. Um, yeah, I think that's like the top for me. I just as a songwriter, I think any songwriter you got to look at like a Dylan, you look at Cash, you look at Lennon McCartney. Just because you got to look at, even if it's not your form, you just look at the best of each genre, right? And you figure like, well, who's the best in this genre, and what can you learn from them?
That's what I do.
Yeah, well, it's cool because I can see that when you give me the names of the people that you like, you're picking people out that are like phenomenal in their own area, which is a good thing as a songwriter, because if you're aspiring to like I want perfection, then you kind of gotta recognize perfection in other stuff.
Yeah, definitely got to pay homage,
Yeah,
those are the greats, so yeah, for sure. Learn a lot. You have to keep learning, never stop learning as a musician, ever. You're never going to be uh the best, the brightest superstar in the sky, like it's every star fades, there's always something you have to learn. So
well, I think it's interesting is the thing about like if you get popular, the one bad thing, like everybody has their like Purple Rain, everybody has their like Hotel California or their Freebird, and they become
mhm.
like an albatross across your neck, right? Because you create that one great song, and then everybody just wants to hear that. And then I think as a musician, you get frustrated if people just want to hear that one song, and you've got all these other songs.
Yeah, that would get frustrating, it seems. I'm not
Yeah,
to that.
yeah. I mean, it pays the bills, but then it's like then it limits you. Then you're being limited by your own work, and that must be really frustrating. That something you created now becomes like an albatross, and makes you. It kind of it doesn't make you feel good, because it's
Yeah,
like
I've
they
heard
want.
that before.
Yeah, yeah. Because I think as an indie artist, you don't run into that as much, because you just constantly are throwing stuff out to see like what's going to hit against the wall. That's
Yeah,
my style. It's like I just keep on putting singles out, and then one of them hits and one of them doesn't. I say, okay, I'll just keep on doing
exactly.
it.
It's just like freedom. It's just like really, I like making music, so I'm gonna do it. That's really what it is.
Well, you got some people say like you should take all your songs, right? And
Mhm.
I hear you do it. You had a lot of songs you didn't release, and but even so, you are releasing. There are some people that won't release anything for like years. You know,
Mm,
at least
no, I
at least.
can't do that. You're gonna miss the moment. You
Well, to
might
me,
miss
it's
the
like
wave or something. I don't know.
well, the problem is like you sometimes in the history of music, people have been wrong about the choices of what they think the fans like. That
Mhm.
a lot of times record companies have actually put out stuff that the artist said they didn't want to come out, and they actually made the decision, and it actually was a better decision than what the artist did. And so that kind of tells you sometimes if you hold on to too much of your work, that sometimes you're not a good. Your audience might actually pick up on something that you don't think they like. And so it's a good strategy in some places. Like I like to use SoundCloud to put like a lot of my demos up. And then when I want to put something out, I say, okay, well, it's going to go wider. Then I'll push it out to iTunes or Spotify or Tidal. But I will always kind of use SoundCloud for my very experimental stuff and see what hits and what doesn't.
Mhm.
It's just a strategy, you know. But even like YouTube, you could just like, okay, I'm put these clips out on YouTube and see what happens. Um, so, what's your opinion about something like that?
I think it's great to figure out a marketing strategy as an artist and see what works for you and what doesn't. I think that's a part of uh, figuring out just more about the industry in general and the business side of music.
Yeah, because some bits, I mean, I've actually worked with labels sometimes, and they were like, "Oh, don't put out all this content." Right, and I experimented with this one label in New York, and we still put out a lot of content, but it's like I didn't put out as much as I wanted. So I did like 36 tracks with these guys, and then like I didn't really like how they promoted them. They kind of told me they were going to do all this work, and at the end of the day, I found that like when I was indie, just doing it myself, I actually did a better job than they did.
Right.
And then I said, well, you know what? That's like the last time I'm going to go with one of these labels because I was like, I tried to do what they wanted, and it still didn't work. And so it's like, okay, like you guys said that you know what you're doing, and then it didn't work. So it's like, yeah, I don't know. Today is like I think it's better to kind of do it yourself, like you said. I think you have more control.
For sure. That's my philosophy.
So, in terms of putting out like a record, are you working toward taking all your singles and maybe creating an EP, or are you gonna stay with like putting out singles?
Right now I am working on a couple more singles. A record is something that I will do, but it wouldn't be for another like year or so.
Yeah, because you said you're still wanting to build your capability before you're ready to go with a full record.
Yeah, for sure. I just think that it would be premature for me to do a record right now when uh I still have so many things that I want to get in order with my music. So,
So, in terms of like building, like if you do a project, would it be like an EP first and then a record, like a shorter form?
um yeah, I would probably do an EP first.
And would the songs
Say.
kind of have a theme? Like, I think the whole idea of an album is like the songs kind of go together in some kind of theme, or even an EP has a theme usually.
Yeah, usually, but well, yeah, I think that's pretty standard, I would say.
Well, I
Uh,
mean, there was some forms like in when you get to there are some albums that really aren't like thematic. They're just like a bunch of songs that kind of go together, but they don't have a theme. They have a feel, but they don't have like a clear theme. It's just like a bunch of like it could be more like, oh, these are hits,
Yeah.
but they don't actually roll together as a full concept. But they're really catchy songs. They all work, and so this album has like 4 top 10 hits. But does it really all gel together,
Well,
or they
yeah, I
just
would definitely want to do a theme, especially for a premiere, like your first project, official that you put together. I think that would be important just to introduce yourself to your audience and kind of tell them who you are versus
yeah,
just
because you're telling a
giving them a
story.
bunch of stuff like, here's my work, like,
Well, I think coming from poetry, I think a lot of songwriters who come from that perspective tend to want to have their work kind of tell a story,
yeah.
you know. And there's some songwriters that are like, okay, I'm trying to make the best song that has the best beat, is the catchiest song. And so an example would be like, if you get like a Four Tops or a Temptation record, you have all these love songs, but they're not necessarily having a theme other than their love songs, right? And they're really good. They're all catchy. It's all just a bunch of top 10 hits, kind of put together. Until you get to Marvin Gaye and you did like What's Going On, and then that has a theme, right? But a lot of the Temptation of Four Top records, they really don't have a theme. They just a bunch of hits put together. That's not bad, but it's not. It's not what Marvin Gaye did. It's not what Stevie Wonder did. It's not what even Michael Jackson went on to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with you there.
With I think an EP could be a bunch of hits. Like if you do an EP, it doesn't necessarily have to have a theme. It could just be like all your songs that are like your hits.
Hmm.
It could. I think sometimes what people do with EPs, they put a bunch of singles out and then they see what hits the wall,
Mm-hmm.
and then the ones that got the most plays then get put into the EP. you know, but and that in itself is like then the fans actually have like a greatest hits record, which in itself is
Yeah,
kind of a theme.
that's something that you should do further down the line, though. you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. I think but a lot of times bands will start off as a singles band, right, and then eventually they take all their singles and they put them together. Maybe if they can't come up with a theme, you know, and then that's kind of like the old school way of putting together records in the 60s and 70s is like they didn't really have themes. It was just all the hits were just thrown together. Um, but it seems to be that the playlist is that kind of thing today in the playlist world. Like a Spotify playlist, there's a bunch of songs that are real, like all these different artists, but they feel like they go together, but they're not necessarily a theme. It's just like they're all got good beats. You all got catchy hooks. You know, so it's like, are you trying to get on these playlists? Is that something that you want to do as an artist? Because this is kind of like the playlist world today as a
Um,
musician.
well, I mean, I'm not actively trying to get on a playlist, but anything that would obviously gain uh, some exposure to my current music would be great for me.
Like an emerging artist playlist. I like stuff like that. Like I think I actually
Oh,
have.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
That's the kind of
that for
playlist I
sure.
like.
Yeah, because it's like I actually there's a website that I've been getting on for years since I was a teenager of like emerging artists. So I've heard a lot of songs like years before other people have, like before they've become like what they are.
Yeah,
Like, and I think
yeah,
that's so cool.
yeah. I like to listen to like a punk. Like I got them on a punk indie playlist and like on Spotify, and it's like anything that's a new punk song comes out, right, or a new
Yeah, I
alternative
think that's
song.
so fucking dope. I think that's how music should be. Like it should just be free for all.
But it's
Sorry.
cool to do that. I subscribe to that because back in the day I used to like do college radio,
Yeah.
and and I used to like always be breaking all these. I go read like Spin magazine and I find out like some new band, they got 4 stars, and then I play them. Because the guys like, oh, okay, I want these guys are getting really good reviews. I'm going to play them. I don't, and they're not being played on the radio, but the critics thought they were cool. I said, well, I'm going to play them.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the critics love bands and the fans don't. But I think it's cool to give new artists a shot, not just give like the popular artists a shot. Is like, that's the whole idea of this podcast is to go on the indie scene and find emerging artists and then give them attention. That's kind of what the point is. But I think I think you're doing a really good job with your style in terms of being influenced by Doja Cat, being influenced by Johnny Cash and Mariah Carey and Chris Cornell. So you have a wide range that you could go anywhere. And so like looking forward to what you come up with in 2022.
Thank you. I'm gonna try to release a lot of music uh within the
Between now
next. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
between now and then, you're going to release like you're going to try. Are you going to try to do like a single like a month?
Well, no, I usually do a single a day.
Oh, wow, that's good.
I'm very progressive making music. I don't release a lot because I'm very self-critical, and I sometimes like a lot of my like a couple of my songs actually like need features, and like I'm working out situations with different artists. A tough issue right now for me is some artists, well, a lot of artists don't produce their own music, so
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to uh, like if we're not physically able to get to each other, it's hard to collab in the way that I want to without having to work through like a third party or something. So
Oh
just
yeah, because if there's somebody's just doing top lines and the other person's doing all the music, then you got like another person involved. Then you
yeah.
have to try to you try then you like if somebody's got to make an adjustment, like it's not just that person. You got to talk to the other person.
Right. So that's an experience that uh you know, I don't know if that's common or not for.
Well, I guess like you can make a choice when you start. It depends on what you do. I tend to work with other artists that are like producer like level musicians, right? So if I do a collab, it's another guy that or woman that they can play like a Moog or something. And so if we got to change something, they can easily change it.
Yeah,
Um,
just like with like a doll.
yeah. So it's somebody that actually has the ability to do it, not somebody said, "Why now I got to go call somebody." Because I actually did a bunch of collabs with other musician producers that basically we can have a conference call and say, maybe change the key, maybe do this, and then they can come back in like 30, minutes and they have another version. Um,
Yeah.
I think that's the choice you make eventually. Like, okay, I can't work with people that take 6 months to give me something. Um, if you want to be more immediate, you have to find people who can actually work at your speed.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a learning lesson.
Yeah, I think eventually, like because there's so many people out there, you can start to make a choice. Like I'm going to put down the law, right? I can't work with people that take 6 months to come back to me. And that's just what I'm going to do. I'm going to find people who are more immediate because I just don't like it. Like if it gets frustrating, you just say, well, you know what? I'm just going to make my own rule, and that's what it is. you know. But and eventually, to me, there's so many people out there. You can probably find the people who can actually fit your style of production. It may take
Right.
a while, but you'll probably find people who are more compatible. Unless you want to wait for the person because you think what they're doing is worth waiting for.
Yeah, there's ways around. There's, it just depends on the person and well, usually, well, I guess it depends more on their music and how the collab and all that because I don't know, I wish it was as simple as just sending vocals over email, but not. So,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because some people, it's not just the vocals; it's like all the other tracks and the backing tracks and everything else.
yeah, yeah. So,
So you gotta, yeah. It's like it's just a matter of like who has the capability to actually make the adjustment within the time frame that you think is reasonable.
And get the project out, because I don't like stuff to sit, it has to keep moving like hot cakes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, if you described like you went like 20, 30 hours on one thing, right? And then somebody
Yeah,
else
that's
is
just my
some,
typical obsessive mind.
well, that's kind of I would say that I work the same way. I mean, I have a bedroom studio with all the equipment. So if
Oh,
I get something like tonight after I get off the air with you, I had something I was working on like a couple hours ago. I'm going to jump back into that, and I might be up till like 2 in the morning working on it, right? Um, if I had to wait for somebody in Chicago to give me something, I probably was like, no, I'm not going to wait.
right.
I would just go play it myself.
Yeah, yeah, that's how it is.
You know what I mean? Because like if you got to wait for somebody to give you a bass line, it's like, well, I can do the bass line.
Yeah, I could have done the bass line by then. You're like, all these thoughts, and then there's the resent. No, I'm kidding. But
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like I could go on my vocoder and I could voice and make my own backup singers. You know, if I gotta wait
yeah,
for like this lady to do something and she keeps on like blowing me off, it's like I'll just go on my vocoder and I'll make a chorus of like female versions of myself and do it myself.
and then you send it to her like, I just did your part better than you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because I'm just like I'm crazy because I want to get it done. You know,
Uh,
like I got a thought and I got to finish it. Right, I got this idea, and I can't wait 6 months because then I'm not going to be passionate about it 6 months from now.
yeah, the fire dies down. I get
Yeah,
it.
there's a certain immediacy. Like that's why people sometimes during the lockdown they're like, "Oh, my whole process is getting wrecked." Like have to be in the studio, right? Because they got to be in there with the people. Like they got to be in there with the drummer, they got to be there with the producer, they got to be there with the keyboardist because they can't do this back and forth. They got to be like right there. And then they've been suffering because they're like, I can't get the stuff done because that's their style. And they're like, I can't wait for a wave file. You know, I'm not. I can't get the feel on a wave file. I can't do
That's
that.
funny.
um, so yeah, I think it's been cool talking. I think we had a good conversation. So I would love to see where you are with what you're doing. Maybe 6 months from now. Well, a lot of people we've had on the show, we do like album release shows or project release shows. So like when you have a project and you have an album ready to go, we could come back and we could have a whole show on that.
Okay, is that for like singles or just like album, like
Well,
EP or?
we've done shows just on people doing singles. I did a band in Sweden that all they had was like a YouTube video for one song,
Mm-hmm.
and we still had like an hour episode to talk about it.
Okay.
So yeah, it's kind of like whatever your feature is. Like it doesn't have to be big because like one song, like I was surprised. Like I was talking to a Swedish band and they made a YouTube video and they did a song, but it had like a lot of stuff behind it, right? And so we ended up talking an hour about how they did the video, what the song was about, how they produced it during COVID and everything. And so we ended up taking so like it doesn't necessarily have to be like 10 songs to make it worthwhile. It can be, you know, anytime you talk about music or art, it can be made whatever it is.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds
All right.
really dope. So I will definitely be interested in doing that.
Yeah, yeah. Just let me know. Just ping me, and we're gonna put this out. Yeah, on all of our 11 platforms, which are audio only. Will be on Spotify, Apple, Radio Public, Overcast, Overture. Well, different ones. Yeah, there's many more. If you go on Anchor, you can see all the list that they publish to. It would be within an hour, typically, and we'll send you the links for the top three, like Apple, Anchor, and Spotify.
Okay, sounds good. It was super awesome talking to you.
Thank you. Have a good night, and you will see our Instagram story promoting this within probably an hour
Okay,
or
you have a good night
less.
too.
Okay, bye.
Bye.